Hey guys, this is Illusion PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading 5 Times Jason Todd Didn't Swear and 1 Time Bruce Did by Weatherboy But Derogatory. This is Chapter 3. Duke and Steph weren't sure what to think of Jason most of the time. Everyone had their own history with him, which was strange since, well, neither Duke or Steph had spent much time with him. So when they had heard that they were being sent out with the Red Hood for patrol, they both figured it would at least be interesting. After all, what were they supposed to expect? The Robin they'd read about who died and came back with green eyes and violence and a crime lord? Only to awkwardly attempt to salvage his life with his family, scathing and hilarious and traumatized. They might not have known him before, but between Duke and Steph, they'd held enough conversations with the guy to know him a bit. But patrol was never something they'd expected to be put on together, which was probably a miscalculation on their part, but still. If this was a test, Steph was going to turn Bruce's costume bright fucking pink. Neon, she imagined. She told Duke as much one night. He'd laughed, and Steph had smiled before worrying her lip between her teeth. Hey, none of that, okay? It's gonna be okay. You've played Mario Kart with him, man. If you two could live to tell that story, then we can survive a night's patrol in Crime Alley with him. Duke quickly reassured her. Steph looked up at him gratefully, but sighed anyway. Mario Kart isn't Monopoly, Duke. But, she said, grinning, I'll bet you $5 he rescues a cat from a tree or some shit. $5 and taking the blame for the next Wayne family screw-up, Duke argued, definitely serious now. I'm not going cheap for your bets anymore. No, inflation is too cruel these days. Taking the blame is way too high stakes. Damien literally broke the toaster last week, and it took us an hour to detect who to reprimand for it, Steph groaned. Hey, no deal then. Todd is a cold-hearted killer, and you were right all along. He puts his hands up in surrender, but Steph hung her head, defeated. Okay, she conceded. Shake on it. With a rather malicious, Duke thought, grin, she spit into her palm and held her hand out. Duke grimaced but took it. You're on. They met Jason on a roof in Crime Alley. He was sitting on the edge of a building, one leg dangling off the side with the other supporting his elbow. Steph suppressed a snort at the dramatic pose. You guys prepared? Jason spoke, freaking Duke. Of course he'd heard them coming, but gods, it was still scary. Eventually he'd get used to the bats, Duke reasoned. Hoped. Psh, we've done this plenty of times, Jay, Steph replied cocky. Don't worry your little head about us, Jason snorted. I know you've done this before, he said, his voice manipulated, making his tone low and dangerous. But this is Crime Alley. Duke swore he could hear the grin, probably a smirk. Debrief us then, Hood. You do know I grew up here, Duke interrupted. Is it that different from Gotham? Both Jason and Steph stopped to look at him. Immediately, Duke regretted opening his mouth. Maybe he could escape fast enough, find a nice cottage somewhere with tea, not coffee, since he'd never be able to sleep in a cottage not surrounded by villains and people. He chuckled. Farts in a Taco Bell, man. Have they told you anything? I mean, you know I'm literally a crime lord. I'm still a hero to people living here. I make people's lives better. Me, the masked murderer. That's how desperate people are. He'd paused. Now he was standing up, arms crossed as he looked between Duke and Steph. Steph looked away. Okay, looky here. Jason waved his arms in a half circle around his head, like a rainbow. Duke was reminded vaguely of a meme Tim had once shoved in his face. Crime Alley isn't the actual name of this place, but it's the one people remember, because there aren't usually good memories associated with this area. It's dangerous, and people murder and kidnap and deal drugs to kids. We're patrolling here today, which means that you two have to follow my lead. You don't know this place. You really, Jason continued, really don't want to get lost. I believe you, Duke replied earnestly. Without being able to see his face, he couldn't assess whether or not the remark meant something in particular to Todd, but he could guess. We'll follow you. Hood seemed satisfied with the answer, and they began to move off the roof. After a beat or two, Steph declared loudly, Aw, Jay, you really do care about us. Jason responded by shoving her. 2 hours later, the Gothamites were forever grateful they'd gone into the gig prepared. Jason was not kidding. They were currently perched on the fire escape of a storage facility. Steph was peering in through the window, and Jason kept glancing at the ground far below them. Duke was focusing on not falling. They were so cramped for no goddamn reason. Got anything? Hood asked. My view is clear. There's 11 of them in the direct vicinity, Steph said. I don't see any drugs or shit. Are you sure this is the right place? This wouldn't be their headquarters, Princess, Jason snarled. And yeah, I'm sure. I've been tracking down that one guy with the butter-churning awful mullet for weeks. Steph squinted. Yeah, sure enough, there was the god-awful mullet. You know, Duke said, I haven't heard you swear once on this mission. Yeah, I actually installed a censorship moderator in my helmet to keep Bruce off my voluptuous behind. Jason quipped back, his fingers nervously drumming on cold steel. Wait, for real? That explains the farts in a Taco Bell. Jason groaned. No, Duke, I don't actually have a filter, he said, turning toward Steph. Tell me we can bust in. Yeah, she replied, pursing lips. I think so. There's a large number of them, but if we play our cards right, it's nothing we can't handle. All right, good enough for me, Jason declared, pushing Steph out of the way. We've been out here for hours. Let's get this over with. He grabbed onto the cold metal bar of the fire escape above him and flexed his fingers. Wait, Hood, maybe we should think this through, Duke began, but Jason pushed off the wall and swung back. His feet collided with the window it shattered, glass shards loudly announcing their arrival, as the red hood flew feet first into the warehouse. Hands up, you overbaked turd muffins, Redhead yelled. Steph shook her head before jumping through the broken window. Duke followed. Immediately, the room broke out in a commotion. Gunshots rang, not the rubber bullets Jason currently had. The perpetrators were calling out to others, maybe taunting. The bats had begun to learn to tune them out and focus on getting the job done. Steph whacked a couple of guys over with her staff before she started getting double-teamed. Duke sprinted over, and the two began working their way through the crowd. That's when the two of them heard the strangest thing. It was yelling. From Jason. Now, the Red Hood yelling in the middle of a battle was definitely not unheard of. He was partially famous for the taunts and snarky comments, and was usually labeled as a little shit, or more fondly, humongous asshole, for his efforts. He would cuss, critique, monologue, joke. Anything he could use with sarcasm was his go-to. This is why hearing Jason yell was strange, because of what he was yelling. In fact, Duke swore that the person he was knocking out paused to listen to what Jason was saying. Not that Signal could blame him, because Jason had just yelled, William Shatner my potatoes! You think you've bamboozled me, you scrawny little tube of toothpaste? It wasn't stopping. Crikey, you almost nicked me there. Make it stop. Well, doesn't that just butter my croissants, thinking you could hit me? Why wasn't it stopping? Oh my goodness gracious, that's actually not good. It did stop. Steph looked up and saw Jason holding the criminal he'd pointed out earlier at gunpoint. However, Jason wasn't looking at him. Instead, he was kneeling, his other arm pulling away from his chest as red began to stain his jacket. Pooh, Jason whispered as the signal and spoiler rushed over to help, jumping over tied-up and unconscious criminals. Dagnabbit, this whole thing was almost a success. And with that entirely unhelpful comment, Jason passed out. Alright guys, and that's the end of chapter 3 of 5 Times Jason Todd Didn't Swear and 1 Time Bruce Did by Whether Boy But Derogatory. I hope you guys liked it, and see you next chapter.